I went and researched a lot of his interviews over the last few years, and one thing that stood out is that Ori is really unique. So, how many of us can say we've stood on stage in front of thousands of people with a holographic, lifelike version of ourselves? Maybe one of us, if that, but Ori's done that. How many of us can say in 2012 we sold a startup to Apple that was an augmented reality? I was barely out of diapers at that point. So Ori's been doing this a long time. He actually sent me a baby photo of himself. And so he's been at this since really birth, it sounds like. And so we're more than honored to have him today. What we're gonna do is basically do an AMA. I'm gonna start off with some questions, and then we're gonna open up the floor to everybody to just ask questions, try to understand what you're trying to get out of your startup, and Ori will be there to be able to answer it. I have first a question and then a game. And the question is something I'm personally very curious about, Ori. And I know there's no perfect answer to this, and nobody actually knows the answer. But to me, this is like the question that's glaring in my head. I think we've all seen these research reports that say AR, VR's market's worth 30, 40 billion. And in my head, something that's worth 30 billion that I'm in every single day and I'm talking to everybody constantly, I thought would feel like a lot larger of a market. And so my first question to you is, are those market size documents correct? And like, this is actually a $30 billion market, or is my gut correct? And it doesn't feel like that to me. And so maybe you can start us off by explaining, where is the money in this industry? If there is that 30 billion, like, where is it and how come we don't have more of it?
Starting right off the bat with where's the money? I
Yep.
love it. First, Don, thanks very much for inviting me, and it's really awesome to see all the founders here. I recognize some of the names, some I don't, so would love to be in touch with everyone today and moving forward. In the opening keynote I did 2 weeks ago at AW in Long Beach, I dedicated a portion about kind of what I call the State of the Union of XR, and gave some of the highlights. Of course, just the tip of the iceberg. But if any one of you have seen it or will see it and have questions on that, kind of want to hear more, happy to follow up on that. But to your question, Don, may I share a document?
That would be amazing. Yep.
I'm disabled right now.
All right. Let me give you control. I think I need to make you the host, so just accept that.
Okay. Okay, looks like I can share. So before I share it, yes, I mean, we've seen lots of analysts predicting crazy numbers, all the way back to, I think, 2012. We've seen 100 billion, 200 billion, all these crazy numbers. It's kind of helping the hype. It can be very detrimental, I think, to investors, to founders, and so on. But I think that the report that I will show you today, it's by Artillery Intelligence, Mike Boland, which is a super credible XR analyst. And the reason is, first of all, that he's been living and breathing this for over a decade. He knows exactly every single number in there, where it's coming from. It doesn't inflate it. I mean, it's not in his nature to inflate things beyond the most conservative numbers. And we've seen some recent reports where people kind of take like IoT stuff and put it in there, or ambient computing, things that are really not related to spatial computing. So this is not the case with this report. It's truly just XR, at least the way I think you and I would describe this market. So let me share with you. Let me know if you can see this PDF.
Yep.
Okay, so this is just one of his reports. It's you have to purchase it. So you're now getting an inside look at it's a pretty valuable report. And if there are more questions, by the way, I could try and show a bit more of that. It's with permission. So Mike is always happy to show some of his secrets to startup founders because he knows, they may become his customers in the future, and he loves to speak with startups. So what we see here is, first of all, that 2024 is a $35 billion industry. And the rainbow colors here show kind of the spread, the breakdown of how different sectors, different aspects of the ecosystem fare in this kind of report. And so that's one thing. The next chart actually shows you the numbers for each one of these sectors. And, if you kind of follow his approach, his kind of the whole practice of how he makes those numbers, collects them and breaks them into groups. To me, it makes a ton of sense. And that's why he kind of is our home analyst at AWE. Actually, you can get like a 6-day free access to his report when you purchase a ticket to AWE. So for those of you who attended the event, you can actually claim that and get some initial access. Some of the things that kind of jump out of this is that enterprise is currently a bigger market than consumers. So I also showed it in my opening, where it's probably around 71% of all the global XR revenue goes to enterprise. That includes software and hardware. And if you take everything else, it's consumer, hardware, software, as well as development tools, platforms, it's another roughly 30%. So I think these numbers are right. I think it's not a secret that if you want short-term revenue in XR, go to, sell something to an enterprise, sort of any of the 20 or 30 verticals out there that are really trying to adopt XR. There is money there. If you're not seeing it, let's talk. I mean, we could probably help you find ways either to understand the market better, to position it better, position your company better. See, what are some of the successful companies doing and how they're claiming the revenue. But again, I think these numbers, at least for 2024, are on point. How does that sound, Don? Any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I'd like to double click and then we'll open up the floor for questions here. So I did a lot of research into the enterprise side of things maybe 2 months ago because I was trying to understand who was making the money. And so I'd like to just do a quick kind of game with you, specifically around the enterprise and that 7 billion in revenue. So if we were to project out, let's say 3 years from now, the year is 2028. Can you rank these 3 areas of enterprise by market size and then give us your analysis on why you believe that? Because these were the 3 that kept coming up in my research. So the number 1 is remote assistance for industrial use cases. So using AR glasses on oil rigs, using AR glasses within factories during packaging and packing. So remote assistance for industrial use cases. HUDs in the hospital and surgical room, and visualization and design for real estate and cars and things of that sort.
So, I mean, these are kind of more like it's sort of a mix of use cases and verticals, right? I think when it comes to glasses, no doubt that remote assistance is the number 1 use case for glasses right now. I mean, it's used in some warehousing, logistics kind of things, but by far, remote assistance is the number 1 use case because it kind of cuts across multiple types of verticals. You know, we've seen people use it to for oil and gas or energy. You know, if you're in the field that you're trying to fix something, or you know, if you're trying to fix some electronic board in an industrial or even a public building or whatever. So that's where it's super helpful. But also in in healthcare, right? I mean, I don't know how many surgeons actually used a Google Glass or Google Glass like remote assistance in actual surgery. But in terms of in South America, we've seen a lot of doctors that or maybe nurses that do not have the same level of expertise as some of the doctors in other places, have been using this as a way to just have a better just get advice from someone that is a bit more experienced than you in the field. So that's on the glasses side. I think one area that you didn't mention as a sort of a use case is training. To me, training in the enterprise is, if not the biggest right now, it's the fastest growing sector. And training and education, right? It's a pretty wide thing, but that shows an immediate value to enterprises. Mostly VR, but also AR in some cases where it makes sense. Whether it's upskilling, training on the job, soft skills, hard skills, all of the above. VR has proven to be a lot more efficient, more valuable, more cost effective than any other form of training, and it's being adopted in a big way. What was the other one you mentioned? You mentioned healthcare.
Visualization in real
Yeah.
estate.
So I mean, I think when you look at verticals, industrial and manufacturing is probably the biggest vertical that is represented in the enterprise software and hardware revenue. Whether it's automotive, aerospace, pharma, all these are big users. I mean, many of them, presented at AWE, kind of their own use cases. Some of them even won Augie Awards, for their implementations. I think we've moved away from the pilot stage that I think this industry was stuck in a few years ago. I think now it's not necessarily kind of enterprise-wide deployment, except for maybe training in some cases. But when it comes to logistics management, industrial manufacturing, it's becoming kind of a bread and butter of these organizations. And on top of it, the digital twin concept, which I think is clear to all of these companies. They need that. They don't always know exactly what they need it for, but they know they need it. And that's already starting to drive revenue for companies that are helping build it. So manufacturing and automotive, aerospace, huge users, and again, and pharma. And then when it comes to e-commerce, retail, advertising, you can actually see it represented here in the second column from the left. That's also a significant market right now. A lot of it may include, just kind of ad hoc campaigns. So, agencies may get nice revenue from that, but not necessarily see a lot of impact on the market in some cases. But it's going beyond that. It's going beyond just the gimmicky campaigns. You see lots of websites, e-commerce websites, which are now employing, see it in your room or in immersive style experiences. And even a metaverse. I mean, we don't talk much about the metaverse, but it's actually it's happening. It's a big source of revenue for startups or agencies that build content, in Roblox or similar metaverse platforms, Fortnite. So we cannot forget that world. And then some of the up and coming verticals are in fashion and beauty, which I think they recognize the value, especially of AR. Starting with smartphone, like iPads as kind of magic mirrors and so on. It's almost become a standard now. When every single website that sells glasses will allow you to be able to see it on your face, right? And that's revenue for the companies that provide this kind of tech or content. So that's kind of from the top of my head. Any related questions on that?
If anyone has questions, we'll move to that section. So feel free to raise your hand. Just click the little raise hand button. And yeah, Ori, I think a lot of what you say is like a lot of that stuff is not secret, but it's behind the scenes in some ways. And so I don't think a lot of VCs pay attention to that, and or a lot of the companies that are servicing those types of needs don't necessarily need investment because those are markets you can generate revenue for. So I think maybe that's why there's a discrepancy in some of the investor mindsets versus what we're seeing in these numbers and what you're saying as well.
Oh, I mean, investors have huge disconnect from all of that stuff. Very few really understand it. I think, and we heard from Anderson Horowitz that it's the most underrated market out there, right? So it's very high level and got a lot of attention, but it's true. And what I am seeing in the last few years is that if, in 2015, 16, 17, you had a bunch of XR-focused investors, like, my super ventures, like the Venture Reality Fund, Anorak Ventures, GFR, Colopal, all these guys. Not going to mention the one you were part of, Don, in those days, which was actually very, definitely a leading force at that time.
RIP.
That's where we met, right? But what I'm seeing in the last few years is that there's a shift towards investors that focus on a specific sector, not a specific technology, right? So there may be really good in pharma or in manufacturing or in real estate, and they find the companies that build XR solutions for that specific industry, and therefore can evaluate it a lot better than just purely based on the fact that they build XR tech. And that's, of course, is a very positive sign. It's a sign of maturity. The numbers are not where they used to be in 2016, 17. I think that all of you know that very well. But in a sense, the good news about it is that it's more mature, that it's based on value, not on hype. So I think there's definitely more on us to educate these investors and the market about those sources of revenue, the use cases that companies are deploying, and if it's real, that's what amazed me. I mean, in the past 18 years, it's always been an uphill battle to convince people that XR is here, it's real, it's not a gimmick. And it's still the case after all this time, and the fact that we're a $35 billion industry. So I know it's frustrating, but it's kind of what brings us all together, right?
Yep. Well said. Well said. All right, we're going to open up the floor for Patrick. I saw you had the first hand up. Patrick, you want to unmute yourself and go for it? Ori, also, if you can, if you're done with the screen share, feel free to cancel that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Ori. Thanks again for AWE. That was wonderful. Yeah, my question is really just kind of, do we, in the charts that you shared and are you clued in at all to where like LBE sits, like location-based entertainment? Does it fit under the gaming one? I saw that B2B to C tag there, which kind of sounds like it could be. I'm just kind of curious. It's something that's interesting to me potentially down the road again, and I've done some of it in the past.
Yeah, I think I actually have some numbers specifically about LBE, but like everything in XR, there was huge hype around 2016 and 17, especially around LBE. We then saw a lot of these, locations just go bankrupt or whatever. But it's actually a pretty significant portion of the VR sales. If you look at kind of the total VR sales, hardware and software, LBE is definitely visible there as a sector. I think operating an LBE can be very tricky. I mean, it's a bit kind of a real estate play more than anything else, right? So people add like a bar and cocktails to generate more profits, higher margins, and so on.
And
So that's
I've been extremely impressed with some of the stuff I've seen at like Sandbox, and I foresee the possibility of like trying to position that way to do content down the road. So I just wasn't sure like
exactly
where
right.
it really set. Did it sit in enterprise? Did it sit in gaming in the charts with respect to like the size? I know they buy most of the HTC headsets, things like that for entertainment, things like that.
Yeah, it's I think the plays in the content, and Drawing Code, they did a nice playground experience in Long Beach with what is it called, the fans dome? Can't remember. So it's kind of a location-based experience. Actually, mostly in AR, they use Magic Leap too. And it's kind of something they can bring it to a location, open it in a matter of hours, and make it work there. So in a sense, a lot more flexible than a physical location, a lot less cost. And here it's obviously a kind of B2B sale, B2B2C, if you will. But I think it's that kind of model is gaining a lot of traction because again, it's low lift for the buyers of this. While we talk here, I'll try to see if I can find the actual chunk for LBE in those charts and show it to you in a second.
So Mike is our newest member, joined 6 days ago. Mike, welcome to the group. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Don. Ori, thanks for making time to meet with us. Hey, Alan. Alan and I know each other from way back. Ori, yeah. So at Luxonic, we've been developing a full radiology workflow platform for XR devices. We've got regulatory approval. We've done a lot of it bootstrapping, and we're raising funding now. And the response we've gotten from a lot of VCs, they love the company, they love our team, but they don't see venture style adoption of in healthcare. So at least that's what they tell us. That's their soft no. They're saying, they just don't see the type of adoption curve happening in healthcare for VR technology. Do you have any stats around that, or any ways that you can think of that we can sort of address that type of a comment?
I can look into those reports from Mike Boland. I suggest to just reach out to him directly, and he would be amazing in kind of pulling very specific data for you. So even if you cannot afford to subscribe to his service, he would be willing to help in kind of pulling some data, and especially where I'll let him know that we had this chat with Don's group. I think there's some. Is it just a pure software solution?
Yeah, just pure software solution. And we have, like, in talking to our industry contacts, like what we're seeing and what we're hearing is large healthcare groups, they're starting to develop immersive strategies, right? And these are massive IDNs in the US. So I think it's coming. I just don't have the numbers to be able to say that, yes, it's coming. I mean, we have revenue. We've seen adoption and revenue growth in the last year. Like our revenue has grown 6x, but it still doesn't seem like enough. And I wonder if it's just a polite way of saying no, and there's something else that they're not telling us, or if it is something.
If you're showing revenue and growth and can show that it's replicable, that there's a lot of similar hospitals or surgeons, whatever, that need this kind of solution, it's I don't think you even need any other numbers. I mean, to show other investments in XR hardware. I mean, especially if they're, again, if they are investors that understand healthcare, they should know it. I mean, they don't need to look for other XR stuff in the space. It's that would be kind of my approach with this investor. But of course, I know numbers always or references always help. So the successes we've seen some successes in healthcare, no doubt. Many of them are kind of a combination of hardware software. So it kind of works better in the world of medical devices, the Siemens medical type of thing. I mean, they can see Siemens acquiring you at some point in the future. So that's kind of an easier road. But also on software side, I mean, are you familiar with now I'm blanking on their name, from the UK, the healthcare-oriented company. It will come to me in a second. And they started with kind of providing training to hospitals, medical professionals, and expanded from there because they have really good kind of inroads into hospitals, and they understand how they work, where the money is, and so on. So I think once you have kind of a good understanding of how they work and how to get to the decision makers and the money, it becomes a lot easier to grow the revenue and then prove to your investors that this is major. I mean, healthcare, I don't think you need to prove to anyone that healthcare is the biggest market anywhere for any, compared to anything, right? I mean, it's almost infinite and will only grow as our population gets older and older. So so for me, it's like, proving your execution, your revenue growth. That's the best way to convince investors, again, in healthcare.
And we talk about that a lot too, Ori, just in general. The best way to counter any investors with strong numbers. And so if you're growing 6x, that should be enough as long as you can have, 100 conversations with VCs, I think, in most context. All right, so I'm going to go top right to the left on my screen here. Clark, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Ori your question? I think you're muted.
I just wanted to follow up on Ori's point. The hospital IT departments are typically understaffed, underfunded, and perceived as a cost center. And transforming that to seeing them as a revenue center, as an efficiency source, instead of as, oh, good grief, we have to manage another piece of software. That's a hurdle that if an investor knows about that and has some history with it, that can cause some of them to really kind of walk away, and for good reason. Also, if the company that's trying to sell the product, whether it's software or a system, isn't basically native to the healthcare industry and really knows the nuance of how to navigate management and all the competing interests and where the actual money comes from in a hospital, boy, it's a hard road to hoe. Besides, of course, well, when is something that somebody might call AR glasses good enough? When is it going to be durable enough? When is it going to be easy to make sure it's sterile daily or multiple times a day? All of those things, they require a lot of expertise to really come up with a path to get traction, either for software or system.
Good point. A lot of challenges, but
Clark, good to see you, Clark, by the way. I wanted to say Clark has been, I think, in some of the very early, the earliest AWEs. I remember you from then. It's good to see you again.
It's a pleasure to see you. Yes. And you know what? Now people are talking about context, like I do with everyone.
That's right. Yeah.
It only took, what, 10, 15 years, but yeah.
That's awesome. Or you're well connected. Nick, I see you left next on my screen to the left. You want to unmute yourself?
But actually, Alan made an interesting comment in the chat here. Why investors? Why not just keep growing your revenue and sort of bootstrapping the company? And there's a lot to say about this. I mean, and I've been in that position, in XR, where you feel like nobody understands us, and here it's growing. There's definitely value. So maybe you're not going to follow the faster growth trajectory, which requires investment. Maybe you grow it more kind of organically with revenue and growing the team. And you know what the message could be to investors in that case. I'm not going to say it.
An FU, I think is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, Nick, was your hand up?
So my
Also,
question.
wait, happy birthday, Nick.
Oh,
Let's
thank you.
give a little round of applause. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thanks for spending your birthday on the call. We appreciate that.
Sure. Spending more time in the healthcare space in XR lately, and definitely think that part of the challenges in healthcare and cost come down to things like getting through pilot studies and clinical trials, anything that has to go through any sort of regulatory rigor. And so that's kind of one of the capital requirements that I see is having the attorneys and the clinicians, the research universities lined up for that. So we're kind of on that journey right now. We're building an immersive art therapy product aimed at the mental health care space. Obviously, those problems aren't going away anytime soon. But curious if you know of any or have any recommendations around specifically fundraising in dilutive or non-dilutive spaces in XR and healthcare. And then separately, I've also heard of strategies of just go to healthcare investors that may not know about XR, but can see some of the value that we potentially bring in. So just curious of your thoughts on anything on that front with healthcare as kind of big opportunity, like you said, but also some big challenges to get through the various levels of funding.
I mean, on the latter, absolutely. I mean, like I said before, sector-specific investors are the ones to go after these days, not XR investors. Unless you're like a pure XR tool or something that is more horizontal in nature. So, I mean, assuming that healthcare investors understand some of the pains and some of the growth opportunities, and you hit on one of those, they shouldn't care about how you achieve it. The fact that it's XR and may not be as mainstream as some like internet technologies or social media technologies. So I think that's definitely the way to go. And in terms of potential funding, what I've seen become very successful in healthcare, one is go to the Siemens Medical of the world. I mean, they also invest in healthcare providers. Again, probably mostly when there's some hardware involved, but not only. They see that, I mean, just like any other big corporations, they want to identify those successful futuristic products before they become big, so they can acquire them or just have a big stake. So that's there's a bunch of some of the big medical equipment providers that I would go after. It's more than money. It's of course a strategic partner in many cases, right? Can help you with sales and so on. The other, which again I've seen successful, especially in the UK, I guess, where we have more free healthcare than in the States, where they also provide grants more freely for healthcare solutions. We've seen I think probably UK is leading in that sense. And that helped many early startups in healthcare to just be able to go from, from zero to Series A, and then all of a sudden you get the interest of the investors.
Awesome. Thank you. George, you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Ori, for the presentation. And maybe for a bit of background, we used to do B2B since 2016, and we've worked on, I guess, a bunch of the verticals in your slides, and I can concur with where the money is. So that's very interesting to see the numbers there. Now we're kind of shifted towards B2C because we're in a small market. We're based in Eastern Europe. So B2B or B2B2C, it's very small here still. So my question to you is, how do you see VC capital going in pure B2C companies, especially if they're not US based? Do you see any appetite to go outside of the US for some of these companies? What are your thoughts on this?
And is that specific VR content?
Yes, VR consumer content, like
Okay.
Entertainment focused, let's say.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts. One, American VCs are always reluctant to invest outside of the US. We know that it's always a struggle, except for very few that are just more open-minded in some way. But it's always been hard, and it's even harder probably in the last couple of years. So that's why we see a lot of startups and founders, creating an office, flipping kind of the ownership, so it's viewed as a US-based company. All these kind of tricks, I'm sure you know of that. That's one. Regarding investment in content, you have one big success, and all of a sudden everybody is in it. Kind of like a Beat Saber, and all of a sudden it's like, I want to invest in a $500 million revenue gaming company. But then it disappears for a while until the next one pops up. So it's always hard, but I'm sure you're familiar with the Venture Reality Fund. That's kind of their focus is on this kind of content. They pay very close attention to it. And also, Andreessen Horowitz, from that same mega thread that Jack Sislow put on Twitter X, it was all about the huge potential in creating content for the Meta Quest store, right? Where have like one guy, two guys building something with no funding at all and becoming like one of the top 10 on the store. That's very attractive to investors, but again, not every investor, right? So it's investors that maybe in the past would invest in gaming or film or entertainment, these kind of things. I mean, within the XR world, besides Venture Reality Fund, Anorak Ventures, maybe GFR sometimes, the Japanese investor. I'm not familiar with many of them, but again, I think if you go into investors in gaming and entertainment, you could have a much better level of success. And again, it's by just showing the numbers, showing the traction that you're having. It doesn't have to be $1 billion revenue, but if you show the growth, if you show the reviews, kind of the typical measures for consumer content, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. I think you can create a lot of interest.
Awesome. Thanks.
It's a wise point you keep coming back to, Ori, where you're talking about go to the sector specific ones because there aren't enough AR VR specific funds out there, unless you're doing something that is a tool. So I think that's very smart. Aditya, thanks for your patience there. Do you want to unmute yourself, ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ori, for all that you've done with AWE. Excited to be speaking at AWE Asia. So we've actually taken a step back. So we were a XR first company, and we were doing these amazing experiences because the best experiences are in VR. So we were building stuff for the Quest Pro and then the Quest 3. And then we kept realizing that, we can't keep up with this. And now we've kind of shifted back. We're building content for 3D we basically do fashion on avatars. And we're trying to see where the traction is and where the customers are. And we believe that just building try-on tools, which work with exactly the same tech, that work on website, that work on mobile phones, is perhaps the way to get the attention of fashion brands. And then if someone really wants, then we build an XR custom solution or a white label solution for the brands. We believe that we seem to be getting more attention that way compared to just keep building on XR. So wondering what you thought of that strategy.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, sounds like you're a lot more aware of what's happening in East Asia, where these kind of things are a lot more popular. I mean, we always say that, we're behind where things are in Korea or Japan. And it's so true. I mean, I personally, I live in the States. I'm not as exposed to these things, but I've had a bunch of programs with Korean companies, startup classes and preparing them for, pitch competitions and so on. And I was blown away by A, their success, and two, their approach, which is in many ways, it's kind of the counter purist approach, right? So I think for many on this call, we were kind of like XR hotheads. We don't like anything that is just on a 2D computer, right? It doesn't count. But the metaverse and a lot of these kind of avatars and avatar fashion in East Asia is being consumed on smartphones or computers or whatever, right? So, but it's not really about the device and how you're accessing it, but it's the type of content and the experience. It's in almost all cases a social experience, and it's in many ways kind of replacing social media with these kind of, whether it's a game or a 3D environment that you may consume from your smartphone, computer, or headset. So I think that's definitely very smart, and always kind of keep looking at, I think especially what's happening in Korea. For me, they're leading the charge. We've had, when was it? 2 years ago, I've mentored a Korean company that had an online game, which they called the metaverse, and I said to myself, this is not a metaverse, it's just an online game. And they've proven me wrong. I mean, it's been growing tremendously. We're talking about like hundreds of millions of downloads. They keep kind of adding more of this kind of personal avatars and all the things around it, the clothing and artifacts and so on. And they're growing like crazy. And in the US, nobody has heard of them, so it's so stay there, kind of learn from the culture or in those parts of the world, and I think it can be very successful until all of a sudden US investors will say, hey, I want a piece of it.
Is that Zepeto?
No, Zepeto is well established. It's big and on everybody's radar today. The one I'm talking about is called Hagen. Probably no one on this call heard about them, but it's super successful, and they're kind of true to. Well, although again, most users access it via a smartphone, they're true to this idea of creating a metaverse, and yeah, doing it in a brilliant way.
That's awesome. I'd like to get some more information on that after 2 questions here. Gregory, we'll have you. Thanks also for being very patient there.
Yeah. Hi, Ori. I just wanted to second what Patrick and Aditya said. Thank you for all. It was inspiring. And yeah, thank you so much. A couple questions. One, I'm kind of on Don's line that it smells a little inflationary, the 35 billion. But I also can understand that it's across so many categories, probably encompassing everything from Fortnite to industrial, to HTC and Oculus. So that could make a little sense. The challenge is when we do investment pitches is that, normally we're looking at market sizing and then what percentage of that market we can actually seize. So we'd be verticalizing it. And I guess my biggest question, two questions about that report is, one, is it just modeled based on his intuitive research, or what's the methodology underneath it? And second, who are the XR unicorns currently? Who are the companies with $1 billion, not just valuation, but revenue across that space that would, have more than 5% of that 35 billion?
Great questions. Regarding the methodology, just go to that website. Happy to share it with everybody after, and just follow it. It's good. I mean, I'm just telling you, it's solid, makes sense. Especially when it comes to, like this year or next year, right? I mean, 5 years ahead, nobody knows anything, so I wouldn't count on it unless you want to show off some numbers to investors. Yeah, it's probably not as material, but the kind of last year, this year, next year, it's very, very close to what's actually happening on the ground. And the second question was,
who are the whales that
oh yeah, unicorns. We're lacking unicorns. There's no doubt. I think it's not as easy to get quickly to $1 billion revenue. I mean, in AR, I mean, the two unicorns for a while now are, Niantic and Snap.
Yeah.
And doing really well. I mean, you all know the history. And I like everything they do. I think it's spot on. It's advancing the industry, it's innovating, and it's staying true to XR, which is not something you would expect with, a company that has become successful. They could shift to something that is more mainstream. After that, we haven't seen, I mean, since the Oculus acquisition in 2014, we haven't seen anything like it up until now. So that's like, I'm sure that's why many investors are kind of scratching their heads, and that's where it's kind of underrated, because we're not seeing those kind of things, and even not even kind of $1 billion revenue. I think what's special about, I mean, in every new wave of computing, you see kind of some new players pop up and become kind of the new behemoth, and we haven't seen it in this wave yet. And again, I mean, with the exception of Snap and Niantic, which they're not Facebook level, but they're definitely significant. And I think the reason is that the incumbents have paid very close attention to this new wave, and they wanted to make sure that they do not miss this new wave. Talking about Microsoft and Apple and Facebook Meta, and of course Qualcomm on one hand, and Nvidia on the other hand, and so on, and many others, which are just concerned, that they might miss this wave. Now, when did the wave start? I mean, we thought it started in 2010. I mean, I kind of consider this industry to be basically 15 years old. But there were some ups and downs, and I think there's still potential for upstarts to become huge, and I think it could still happen, even on the hardware side. Although, we have Meta investing tens of billions of dollars in Apple and Samsung and so on, all investing way beyond any startup can ever invest. I think there's still potential, but mostly on the software side. I think on the software side, we haven't seen many super sticky things. Not on the entertainment side or the application side. And it doesn't mean that it's not possible or that there aren't such use cases. I think it's clear that they are, just a matter of finding them. And unlike many people, I don't think we need to wait for this ultimate hardware before everything could happen. I think hardware is good enough to do almost anything that we need to do today. Whether it's smartphone or super lightweight AR glasses, or the Meta Quest 3 or the Vision Pro, the hardware is allowing us to do almost anything. So kind of growing a new unicorn, I think, is absolutely possible, and it should be the aim of everyone here. We know it's going to be harder than in maybe social media or AI, but it's there, and it has to happen. We're counting on you guys.
Real quick follow-up. Just what is your timeline, since you have such insight into this, and I also really appreciate the VR AR museum. What is your timeline for super lightweight, fully functional glasses?
I vowed not to predict that. Even in my opening, I've made some huge blunders on that front. Going on stage in 2014 and saying that in 10 years, we will sell 1 billion smart glasses. Where are we today? So I'm not going to say that. I mean,
just under that.
I think what's that?
So just under that.
Yeah, just under that. I think again, I'll go back to what I just said. Don't wait for that. There's so much you can do today.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Ofer, go for it.
Great. Almost got it right. Ofer.
I said it right that time. Come on.
Eventually.
Thank you. Big
So
O.
first I wanted to, there you go. First, I wanted to thank you a lot, Ori. I've known you for many years, and I think your events are only getting better and better. So thank you so much for that. You really rock. I want to take this opportunity, and of course also to Don for putting this whole thing together. I want to take an opportunity here to see if we can optimize the experience for entrepreneurs. It feels a little bit in AWE, to me at least, over the years. And again, I love it. I just a little bit of hopefully positive, twist. Maybe we can make limited out of this somehow. But it just feels a little bit like there's a lot of pay to play, and especially for XR startups, where a lot of us have to bootstrap because, frankly, as you mentioned earlier, Ori, the investors out there for this particular vertical are sort of like not there. They're just not around. They don't exist. I think that's part of the issue. They just don't get how this industry works. They haven't seen those unicorns yet. We all know they're going to arrive. It's just a question of time. It's a little bit of slower runway, but still, there's got to be a way to optimize. Currently, the feeling for an entrepreneur is you go in there and it feels a little bit like, oh, here's the startup pitches, which are always just boring. There's like 5 minutes, boom, boom, boom. It just feels like a little bit like a high school, pitch or something. It's just like it doesn't give the credence, the respect that I would expect for entrepreneurs, which I think should be a lot more visible. Because to be honest, this is the entrepreneurs are the ones driving all the innovation here. It's not the corporates at all. If anything, corporates can stomp it, maybe sometimes out of existence.
Big O, I gotta jump in because Ori's been amazing for startups. We talked about this before.
Again, I'm not trying to down. I'm trying to optimize down. So hold on a second, please. And actually, I'm trying to maybe offer for you both. I'm sure you're already talking about it. Maybe you can do something about it, because I think that there's an opportunity here, finally, through you, Don, with putting together sort of an ecosystem of entrepreneurs and startups that now can be dished in these events at AWE, especially. We can mingle in some kind of a maybe structured way with some industry experts that are not necessarily XR experts, has been discussed. I fully agree. Or you mentioned that. I fully agree. It's been discussed here multiple times that if we can just get people that are vertically really, really good at SaaS, or somebody who's really, really good at consumer XYZ,
we gotta be conscientious of time. Can you ask your
so
question in one sentence? And then we gotta
I said from the beginning, I'm not asking a question. I'm just giving a couple of tips. But hopefully I got the question across. And the last thing I was going to say, Ori, is I would love to see that AWE Israel come back, just because there's so much innovation there. If there could be, I don't know if it's in your roadmap maybe for next year, but something around, maybe a multi-day as opposed to just a
All
single.
right. I hate to cut you off, but we got to move on because we only have 3 minutes of Ori's time. We want to be respectful and make sure we get through the last few questions.
Am I able
here.
to get a couple of responses from Ori though, or?
Sure, Ori, do you want to go for it?
Responses. Thank you for the suggestions. Always open for improvement especially on how we support startups. We'll hear more in the future.
Ori, you've been there for startups since day one, and you're arguably the #1 person in our industry that's helped people. So I just want to reiterate that from my perspective. Daron, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Hey, Ori, and everybody. I was wondering if you can. So I'm constantly saying to people, games drive technology, but the productivity drives adoption. And I'm waiting for that moment, which I think is coming, where companies start buying VR headsets to employees. And I was wondering if you have a hunch for that timeline, when do we start seeing that?
That's an awesome question. I think, if you follow what PwC and Deloitte are doing, I think PwC has the largest number of headsets anywhere in the world. We're talking about like tens of thousands of headsets for their employees, which they use for training, but also to kind of to educate their own customers, right? So they're not. I mean, they're not buying the headsets for just day-to-day productivity just yet, I think, but for things like like training, definitely. Or also, I think it was mentioned before, the visualization and design, where I think companies are purchasing headsets for that purpose, and not just headsets, but also software and the different tools and so on. So I think it's starting to happen. Well, I think what's cool about this is that the price point, for some it is important, but not for many of them it's not. It's like, how can you price put a price on safety or productivity when you know that this is improving it 3 times, 10 times over traditional computing approaches, right? So we don't have the exact numbers, but even the Vision Pro, which is, we all think of it as so expensive, is not deterring enterprises from buying it when they see the value. We've seen Apple for the first time ever, maybe, saying, this is a device for enterprises. I've never heard Apple say that, right? So that's kind of a signal that they're seeing some traction in that market, even for this very expensive device. Another one, defense. We don't talk a lot about defense, but the defense industry probably bankrolled XR since day one. We're talking about 68, 65. That's where the money came from. And for many decades, and still to date, a lot of the funding is actually happening from in the defense sector. If you also include the aerospace in it, it's even bigger. So these guys, they're purchasing headsets for their so-called employees. So it's actually a growth area as well.
Because to the whole discussion here, my hunch is that this is going to be the watershed moment, right? Once you have a Microsoft going like, you know what, we're getting a headset for all of our employees because they need to use it. All of a sudden, there is investment everywhere.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's a good point. I mean, you didn't see enterprises say, we'll buy you a smartphone. Actually, maybe during the BlackBerry days, they did buy BlackBerries for salespeople. But not, iPhone and Android. I don't think they've been buying. But then the iPad became like an enterprise device, and they did buy those in large bulks, right? So I suspect that could happen very soon, and I would see, you know, training again as the probably the biggest sector that will see the drive in hardware sales for enterprises.
Thanks for that question.
Thank
Ori, I know on our calendar we had you for an hour. Are you able to go 3 more questions?
Sure.
Awesome.
I mean, so much fun with you guys.
Legend. You're a legend. Thank you very much. By the way, everyone loved your background. How many headsets have you counted there?
Actually, I haven't counted it. You know, we're talking about like, I don't know, 30.
Yeah, literally 30. That's awesome.
If you count the Viewmaster and the Victorian stereoscopic here, then it's a bit more.
That's cool. That's where is that all from the museum, or you just naturally have those?
No, these are things that I have actually. Most of the
awesome.
museum, I mean, not many from here were part of the museum. It's from many other pioneers who have been in it for, you know, since the 70s, 80s, 90s.
What's the oldest headset you have behind you there? Do you know?
It's the Victorian stereoscopic thing, which is not exactly a headset, but definitely one of the milestones towards spatial computing. But it's good question. It's probably either the ODG Air glasses or OptinVent. Anyone remembers OptinVent? They created one of the early Air glasses. It's right here, like 2010. So really one of the first ones.
You probably got some of Steve Mann's equipment, no?
I don't have any of Steve Mann's, no. It's on his face, so you can't really...
He's never taken it off.
I remember trying the ODG the first time. Samson, do you want to unmute yourself when you get a moment? Ask your question there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Don. And thanks, Ori. I just wanted to ask you, do you feel like that one of the reasons that the market's actually having a hard time grabbing traction, if you will, is kind of the defining or value proposition of the overall language that we are giving consumers? I mean, because when I look at the charts and some of the things that are presented, especially in training's come up a lot in this conversation and kind of the education side of things. And there's probably a lot of people here that are in the games department or looking that type of thing. But when we look at the overall language, right, of training, because if you're going to use a headset for your kid's soccer coach, right, or a piano lesson, a $500, and just like you said, a $3,500 investment becomes minimized dramatically. Right, the headsets become, but when we talk about that from a gaming console standpoint, now we have to be on parity and also have the content parity of the current console environment or the PC environment to be on the same level. And even Oculus can't compete with just like even the processing power on that side of things. And so I'm just curious if you have kind of a thought process in that overall language that we're still in our infancy, just as an industry trying to define it because everyone's trying to grab a little piece of the pie instead of, you know, really defining that overall.
But what do you mean by language? The language of interaction or how we describe the headsets? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, we're still for a user, right? Like, oh, I buy it for gaming, or I buy it for training, or I buy it for enterprise, or I buy it for this, right? Instead of it just being, you know, a benefit, like an overall benefit to the human experience, because you really do have the ability to develop soft skills that can apply to in real life. And this is why I think enterprises grabbed onto it so much.
Yeah, but I think that's been a driver for any gadget or hardware sales ever. It was kind of what's the primary use for that thing, right? So
sure,
you know, you bought the first computers for the VisiCalc, that early spreadsheet or whatever, and things like that, right? Or a typewriter. So I think the same here. And Gaming, is definitely a great entry point for teens. We just saw this recent data where it said 1 in 4 teens in the US plays VR.
Right.
So it's not, played one time, but actually they're playing it on it doesn't necessarily mean they have a headset, but they're playing it on an ongoing basis. So I think for teens, it's still a great entry point into that world. And for enterprise, this, again, training.
I saw him going there as he was finishing that sentence. He got a little fuzzy and pixelated.
Is he gone?
Yeah, hopefully.
Oh, we lost him.
I'll send him an email. I think he'll come back. He was the host. I wonder if
I blame the 5G.
Yeah, exactly. Well said, Alan. Well said. All right, let's give him a few minutes.
To address this giant column of conversation that's going on and the number of headsets in households, it probably is less than 5% in households.
There's at least 20 million sold, and if they're all
Call
in
it
the US,
20 million, I would say
16% of households. Because there's 127 million
because you're
households.
assuming that they all went into households and didn't go into companies.
And 20 million.
I mean, for Meta Quest, I would argue with you that 95% of them went to households. It's an entertainment device.
Oh, I would
and it's
argue
the best.
against that, actually.
I mean,
I would
besides
think
Meta, who do you think's buying them? I guess.
Well,
and some number of game companies.
Meta's got what, 80% of the market share in headsets?
At least. Consumer, it's probably significantly higher.
Than enterprise? I don't think so. But all right.
Josephine, were you jumping in there?
Yeah, I mean, look around you. I mean, do you see 20%? What did you say? 28% of the house that you know around you? I mean, household that you know around you will have a headset. I know that I don't. And so, and also we were talking about, is it the figure for Europe and the US or for the US?
It's unclear. It's a little bit foggy.
Yeah, so that divides, if you count Europe, it's already 400 million. It's also 400 million people. So it's 10 million in each continent. They probably bought a lot in Asia as well. I don't know. It's just
so the data that I found is 23%.
But that's 23% have tried it, not who have it.
It says okay, the thing is they have sold them, right? So unless there's more than one in a household, which is low likelihood at this point.
That's us, y'all.
If it's 30 million,
I got like 10 in my house.
You're at the number.
Yeah, we're the ones who bought 10 each.
Sure, that's fine. But I mean, what do you think? I mean, really, people that are developing.
There's a high likelihood of multiple in a house, especially a gamer.
There's 30 in Ori's backdrop.
Ori keeps rejoining and dropping, so I think he's got an issue on his end.
I think Ori bought them all.
I don't think the numbers can actually cut up
the 10 million
to, right? They're bought through regular retail channels.
I think Ori is seeing the chat and he's scared, so he's just leaving.
Yeah, I actually wish I hadn't said anything.
We've devolved. We're eating each other alive.
I love you guys.
There's enough to make money. I think we can leave it at that. At this point, you can make money if you're doing entertainment.
It's the right.
What do you call the gorilla thing? Gorilla tag? Oh my god!
Yeah,
love that game.
It's mostly young kids too. I think the 10 to 12 range is a bigger market than people realize.
Huge.
Totally. All right, so Ori, I see Ori keeps rejoining and then getting booted. I'm trying to offer him video, so they might be wrong in his end, and we'll let him try to go through that. Tom and Clark, do you two want to maybe ask your questions just to the general room, and let's see if we can put together an answer in supplement of Ori for the time being? Tom, I know you've had your hand up for a while. Thank you.
Sure, I'll start here. I exhibited at AWE 2013, so I wanted to connect with Ori again. He gave me a little corner desk because it was one of the leftover spots. But we are totally focused on productivity of the enterprise using a wearable, neck-worn device to help give people a workstation level control while they are immersed. And we view this from the computer-aided design approach, where you're immersed in your 3D situation and you need to be able to navigate around there without finding your keyboard and mouse. And I was just wondering what Ori's impression was, or I'll take anybody else's impression on what the pain point is at this point for better workstation level control while you are immersed that is needed beyond voice and gesture.
A great question for this room.
So I have a background that's both an architect and a 3D artist, been working since forever. I think a lot of startups have tried to push this. You have Gravity Sketch, you have Shape6R, which kind of moved away from 3D content to kind of becoming a Figma for XR apps in general. The problem with doing actual 3D design is you need precision. Unless you're doing something creative like sculpting or ideating or like kind of mind mapping or just something not specific. But typically, especially in CAD, you would have like to the millimeter. You need precision that you don't have when your hands are up in the air, right? So if my hand is on the desk, it's stable, then I can, pull a slider up until I see it snap to this edge, and then I release the mouse. So even if, I can appreciate benefits from being immersed in a 3D environment because I get to see, I get better scale, better everything. I don't have precision of input. So it might be still faster for me to rotate my viewport 10 times in 4 seconds to get the perspective, but gain that precision. So for me, if you're doing design review, then VR is great. If you're doing actual modeling and you need to be precise, I don't think we're there yet with the hardware side. And the problem is, when I'm doing modeling, I'm using all my fingers, right? I'm using at least 3 buttons on my mouse, dozen shortcuts with 5 of my fingers on my left hand. That's how I work. And until we can get to that level of high input per second, I don't think we're going to see professionals using 3D modeling in VR specifically.
George, I have that exact same experience and similar background with architecture. Yeah, the efficiency of a keyboard and mouse is unparalleled. That's one of the things that's excited me is the ability with full pass-through to use the keyboard and mouse with the holographic view. But but this type of thing, the Minority Report is for science fiction, and the controls are precision. Thank you.
Yeah. And the multiple screens, that's a benefit in mixed reality, I guess, because you get to see references. But any professional 3D artist or architect or whatever already has like a killer monitor setup. And after a few screens, I mean, I hate this idea of having 100 screens, right? No, you can't have 100 screens. And maybe 5 of them play some random YouTube or I don't know. That's bullshit.
Yeah, I saw Meta just released the new AI generated 3D models, so just leave that to the AI.
Again, for concepting and quick prototyping, sure. For production, it's going to be a minute.
Yeah.
As a programmer, I'm already getting concerned about AI, like replacing programmers. So I think we should all be thinking about that. Yeah.
Copilot's great.
Clients should know how to articulate what they need first. So then
I have to give a shameless plug. I covered the Meta thing on my show this morning. I do a daily tech news show. If you guys are interested, I cover everything from genetics to space travel to XR AI. I'll put the link in the chat.
Not shameless. Just do it. We love it.
Okay,
thank you.
Well, I find it interesting, so maybe you guys will too.
I'm sure we would share it there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
All right, wait, Clark, do you want to ask your question as the finale, and then we'll hop off here? I think
Not really a
Ori
question. I
lost.
just want to endorse that George totally nailed the issue with 3D models. Review and in some way with some kinds of models, not including BIM, you could do some modification, things like that, but no build, not for quite a while. That's for sure. I originally raised my hand for a point that Ori made. He was referring to Apple talking about enterprise now for the AVP, but I didn't get any indication at all that anybody at Apple that was making decisions even considered enterprise up till the day of the announcement, when so many people started talking to him immediately after the announcement. From a product, just the definition of the product, high quality, good usability, and in terms of UI and in terms of image quality, and the price point, it just screams enterprise. But I can only imagine that Apple, it does, the minute you saw any of it, it did that. It was obvious. But I can only imagine that Apple's good reason to just focus on consumer and just weren't considering it. But boy, did they pivot quickly. And that was wise.
I don't know that it is an enterprise focused device. I think it's a developer kit. And, if you look back.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you look back at the HoloLens, it was $5,000. The Magic Leap was, I think, $4,000 or 3,500. And so 3,500 for a developer kit, it's reasonable.
Yeah. They dropped the ball in terms. They didn't provide the kind of developer ecosystem that they did with the original iPhone. So really it's not fully focused as a tool even for enterprise yet. Except you're right.
I think Apple's typical approach to enterprise is through consumerization. So before, enterprises didn't really care about Macs or iPhones, but they were forced to because of the user experience was so good that their employees were asking from the bottom up. And so I think Apple tends to harden technologies and get to economies of scale through consumerization. And that typically is a bottom-up approach to enterprise. You see this with like Notion and other consumerized products. They get hardened through lots of population of users. You see this with Apple improving the display on a Retina display on the iPad that you don't really need. If it's a Retina display, it's a Retina display. But the reason why they have a high-net display is because they need to bring down the economies of scale for the Apple Vision Pro.
Does anybody have any numbers for how many users might be using some of their apps over there on Vision Pro? Is there like more than 200,000 people? Are they all developers basically, or what's the situation there for the most part? I guess nobody knows.
Tough to know. I gotta imagine it's significantly less than 200,000, just based on sales, and then not 100% of those people using it there. Devin, I saw you had your hand up. I want to make sure we get you there. I think you're muted. Wrong audio. All right, I'll answer that question when we figure that out. Just let us know when you can talk. Yeah, I watched the whole keynote speech from Apple the other day. I was pretty unmoved. Overall, I think it's, there's small progress that's happening. Devin, you got it?
Yeah, I think so. Good now?
All right, cool. Yep, perfect.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about productivity, and I think the Apple Vision Pro, the productivity problem space, I think exists a lot right now in the operating system level. Going from Apple Vision Pro back to Quest, I don't know if anyone else feels this, but it feels like kind of moving back a decade because everything is full screen all the time on the Meta Quest Pro and the general platforms. In Apple Vision Pro, the operating systems gives you that productivity ability to have multiple apps running in parallel. That parallel operating system allows for you to actually interact with email, videos, like all the things we do now. I'm sure if anyone here presses Alt-Tab, we'll all have at least 10 different applications open right now. And so to me, like talking about productivity, in VR right now is such a hard topic when we look at the Meta Quest platform and the operating system, what it allows us, because it forces us into that full screen environment. And I think one of the biggest strengths for Enterprise and Apple Vision Pro is that it's already started off with such a great foundation for multi-app usability there. Users actually being able to do multiple things at the same time and allowing developers to build bite-sized applications. Like we've seen the market, the App Store fill up significantly for the App Store based off of iPad apps that have been ported to Vision Pro, and even small spatial apps created with the spatial UI tools that they released to the Apple Vision Pro. Not even Unity apps are really dominating the market at this point. So yeah, I'd definitely be watching Apple Vision Pro because of those productivity moves that they've done. And I feel like it's been a big shift in just the operating system side of it all. So.
Did you guys see the latest tech altar that talks about app intents? So app intents are built from the Siri workflow system. And so whereas an LLM might be imprecise as an agent, we saw this with like the rabbit. App intents are precise. Basically, they're hooked into local applications, so data doesn't have to leave the device to interact with an artificial intelligent agent. And so I think this is significant because in general, apps don't make sense. In fact, the way that we communicate, we switch context incredibly frequently. And apps put you into a mode very frequently. You can only do one thing at a time, and that's not how we communicate. So I think the addition to artificial intelligence, to imprecise interfaces like audio with AirPods and the Apple Vision Pro, where you're looking at things, but it's going to be very difficult to be as precise as a mouth. That lends itself to using conversation where 70% is gestural. So you'll need your hands, you'll need your facial expressions, and you'll also need your voice to be able to communicate. And I think that app intents are a huge push toward enterprise making AI efficient enough and precise enough to be able to ask exactly what you want and get what you want instead of a different answer that's non-deterministic every time.
Got a second birthday on the call. Happy birthday, Alan. Everyone, say happy birthday. Welcome. Third birthday, actually, America tomorrow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats, Alan. Thanks for spending
Thank
time.
you guys. Go America.
Go America. Well said. All right. Do we have any last questions before we wrap up? And I think what we'll do after this. So next Wednesday, we have our same type of conversation with Peter Rojas, who was the founder of Engadget, partner at BetaWorks, and is now director of product management at Meta. That conversation, he's an unbelievable entrepreneur and has been on the venture capital side, invested, I think their fund was 50 million. So he's going to be much more focused on how do you lead, how do you hire, how do you grow your startup. He put 400 grand into my last company, and out of all, I had 30 investors. Out of all of them, he was the number one most honest and challenging as far as like the reality of our traction versus what I thought was happening. And I didn't really listen to him because I was arrogant and thought I was, going to go build this Zuckerberg type business. But that's one of my regrets, is not listening to him. So I really hope that he comes with the hammer that he always has. And, he does it in a really nice way, but he really, really is thoughtful around user traction and understanding your market and stuff like that. So I'll share the link to RSVP for that one. But that'll be next Wednesday, and we'll do it as the same format where it'll be just our collective, and we'll be able to ask some questions and do all those things as well. Any last going away points?
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks,
Don. Thanks very much.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming. That was fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep.
Thanks,
I'll talk to you
Don.
soon. I'll see you in school. Thanks everybody. Adios.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.